There's a stock ticker on Wall Street that spells out the word love. 4 letters. L-U-V. For 50 years, that wasn't a marketing trick. It was the entire business plan. Maybe you've flown Southwest. Maybe you noticed sometime in the last year or two that it stopped feeling like Southwest. The free bag, the seat you used to earn by getting to the gate early, gone, one by one, like someone was steadily taking back promises nobody remembers signing. Here's what nobody's telling you. You're right to feel that. Somebody did decide this. Not the founder, he died in 2019. Not the pilots who still show up every morning in the same blue and gold. Somebody you've probably never heard of, in an office you will never fly to, ran the numbers on 50 years of love and decided it was time to sell it. This isn't really a story about an airline. It's a story about who owns the things you trust and how easily that can change without anyone ever telling you why.
So let's start at the beginning, not with who took something, with what was actually built, and by 2 men who had no real business succeeding. There's a story people like to tell about a napkin, a triangle sketched over drinks, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. 2 friends deciding right there to start an airline. It's a good story. It's mostly not true. What actually happened is less magical and somehow more impressive. Herb Kelleher was a lawyer, measured in a room, sharp on paper, the kind of man who kept a bottle of wild turkey in his desk drawer and used it. Rollin King flew small planes and ran a modest investment firm, and he carried one stubborn belief. Texas was big enough, and its people tired enough of overpaying for an airline that simply refused to play by the old rules. They had almost nothing. No terminal, no fleet, barely a plan. What they had was a loophole. Fly only within the state of Texas, and the federal rules built to protect the giants wouldn't apply. Ordinary people could fly for what they'd normally pay for a bus ticket. The giants noticed anyway. Braniff, Trans-Texas, Continental, 3 airlines that considered themselves untouchable, took 2 men with a business plan and no airplanes to court, and tried to keep them grounded before they ever left the runway. It took 4 years. It reached the Supreme Court of Texas, then the Supreme Court of the United States. And on a December morning in 1970, the country's highest court told the giants no. Let them fly. 6 months later, they did. June 18th, 1971. 3 brand new airplanes that Boeing had built and nobody else wanted. Painted like nothing else in the sky, lifted off from Dallas Love Field. That's where the ticker symbol comes from, by the way. LUV. Not just a play on love, a play on home. Employees called him Herb, not Mr. Kelleher, not behind his back, and not to his face either. Those were the same thing at Southwest, and that wasn't an accident. That was the whole philosophy, standing right there in a name. Here's the part almost nobody tells you. Kelleher didn't build this company the way companies are supposed to be built. He said it plainly, more than once in his own words, to anyone who'd listen. Take care of your people first. They'll take care of your customers. Your customers will take care of everyone else. In that order, not the other way around. For an airline, in an industry that has bankrupted itself again and again, that sounded like a man about to lose everything. He didn't. The 47 straight years, through wars, through recessions, through the fall of 2001, when every other airline in the country was bleeding out, Southwest turned a profit. Every single year. Not once, not twice, every year. It became something close to a law of physics in an industry that doesn't believe in laws. Herb Kelleher died in January of 2019 at 87 years old. And for a while, it looked like the thing he'd built might just keep going without him. The way a heart keeps beating out of habit. Then came December 2022. A winter storm rolled across the country. Every airline struggled that week, but only one of them never really recovered. Southwest's crew scheduling system, the invisible piece of software responsible for knowing where every pilot and every flight attendant was supposed to be, simply broke. Crews sat stranded in the wrong cities. Planes sat empty in the right ones. 16,900 flights cancelled. More than 2 million people stuck in airports over Christmas. Some of them sleeping on the floor, while a company that had never once let them down in 50 years, quietly, finally, did. The storm had a name. They called it Winter Storm Elliott. Nobody thought twice about that. Storms get named. It's just how forecasters keep track. But 18 months later, another Elliott would come for Southwest. This one wouldn't need snow.
Years before Southwest ever heard the name, this same fund went to war with an entire country. Argentina defaulted on its debt in the early 2000s, the largest default in the country's history at the time. Most lenders eventually settled for a fraction of what they were owed and moved on. One fund didn't. Elliott Management, founded by a financier named Paul Singer back in 1977, chased Argentina through courts on 3 continents for more than a decade, refusing every discount, refusing every deal. Until in 2012, a judge halfway around the world sided with them so completely that an actual Argentine naval ship was detained in a foreign port, held like collateral until someone paid what Elliott said they were owed. They don't lose. That's not a boast. It's closer to a warning nobody in Dallas seemed to hear. So, in June of 2024, when Elliott Management filed paperwork with no fanfare at all, revealing they built a stake worth $1.9 billion in Southwest Airlines, the people who understood what that fund actually was felt something closer to dread than curiosity. Somewhere inside Southwest's headquarters, people who'd spent entire careers calling their chief executive by his first name were reading that same filing on their phones, trying to understand what it meant for them. Activist funds don't invent anything. They don't build anything. They buy a piece of a company, a real piece, enough shares to matter, enough to demand a seat at the table. And then they tell everyone still sitting there exactly what's wrong with how it's run. Sometimes they're right. The stock price usually agrees with them before anyone else does. Some economists call what happens next accountability, finally arriving. Others call it something closer to strip mining. Take what's valuable, leave the culture behind as rubble, move on to the next target. Both of those things can be true about the same 15 months. Elliott's letter to Southwest's board didn't read like an insult. It read like a diagnosis. Years of a stock price going nowhere while rivals climbed. A board that hadn't meaningfully changed in a decade. A culture, they argued, so devoted to protecting its own traditions that it had stopped protecting its shareholders. And then came the part that made headlines. Elliott wanted the chief executive gone, and the chairman gone with him. If the board refused, Elliott had a threat with teeth. a proxy fight. In plain terms, a vote. Every shareholder, from the retirement fund holding a few thousand shares to Elliott itself with its billion-dollar position, would choose who sits on the board. Democracy, more or less. If your vote happened to weigh $1.9 billion, choose, essentially, who runs the company. Boards almost never want that vote to happen. Once shareholders start choosing sides in public, a company has already lost something, whether it wins the vote or not. Southwest didn't wait to find out. By October of that same year, the company had reshaped its own board before a single vote was ever cast. 6 new directors, chosen with Elliott's input, took their seats. The chairman, a man who had spent decades at the company, announced he'd be retiring early. It looked, from the outside, like surrender. Except the chief executive stayed. Bob Jordan kept his job. Nobody quite agreed on why. Maybe the fund got what it actually wanted without needing his head too. Maybe there was more happening behind closed doors than anyone outside will ever know. But it left the whole story sitting somewhere strange. Not a clean victory, not a clean defeat. Just a company that walked into a boardroom looking one way and walked out looking like somebody else had quietly redrawn the org chart while nobody was watching. That's the part almost nobody tells you about power like this. It rarely needs to win outright. It just needs the other side to decide that losing quietly costs less than fighting publicly. And once that decision gets made, once a company chooses not to fight, everything downstream starts to change. Not all at once, quietly. One familiar thing at a time. One familiar thing at a time. By May of 2025, the bag stopped being free. 54 years. Since the very first flight out of Love Field, a checked bag never cost you a dime at Southwest. Now it costs $35 for the first one, $45 for the second. Small numbers maybe, against a ticket price, but that policy was never really about money. It was the company's handshake. 54 years of the same handshake, and then, without a word, it stopped. By January of 2026, the open seating went too. 53 years of first come, first served, of earning your spot in line by showing up early, not by paying extra for it. Replaced by assigned seats and a new menu of fees for the good ones. And in February of 2025, Southwest did something it had never done in its entire history. Not after 9/11, when half the industry grounded planes and cut staff. Not during the 2008 financial collapse. Not during a pandemic that emptied every airport in the country. Southwest laid people off. 1,750 corporate jobs, about 15% of that workforce. Gone, in a single announcement the company itself called unprecedented in 53 years. 1,750 people who, plenty of them, had never worked anywhere else, who'd built entire careers, entire identities, around a culture that promised, out loud, for decades, that this was the one airline that didn't do this to its own. Even the hidden machine underneath all of it went away. For years, Southwest had locked in the price of jet fuel ahead of time, a strategy so effective that during one stretch of the 2000s, it accounted for a majority of the company's entire profit. While every rival paid whatever the market demanded, Southwest had already paid, months earlier, at a price nobody else could touch. That program ended too. Folded into the same year as everything else, with no announcement of its own. The same year all of that happened, the Wall Street Journal ranked Southwest the best airline in America. Not the friendliest, the best. Sit with that for a second. The airline that just broke nearly every promise it ever made you was, by almost every measurable standard, doing the best flying in the country. If you've made it this deep into a video with me, that tells me something about you. You're not here for the 7-second version. You're the kind of person who actually wants to understand how something like this happens, not just what happened. That's exactly who this channel exists for. If that sounds like you, subscribe and come back. We do this every day, looking closely at the people and the systems that decide, without ever announcing it, the shape of things you thought you already understood. Because if you've ever loved a place, a brand, a person, and watched it slowly turn into something you don't recognize, you already know this feeling has nothing to do with airplanes. So let's go back to the airplanes anyway, because it's 2026 now, and Southwest just made a promise that's either the smartest bet in its history or the last one it ever gets to make. The company told investors to expect at least $4 a share in profit this year, more than 4 times what it earned the year before. Not a hope dressed up as a strategy, a number said out loud, in public, to people who can hold you to it. And here's the part that should make you lean forward instead of relax. Elliott Management, the same fund that forced this entire transformation, has spent the last few months quietly selling, down from a stake that once approached $2 billion to something just under the 10% mark that would have let them force another vote. Maybe that's confidence. The job is done. Take the win, move to the next company. Or maybe it's something closer to doubt. The people who diagnose the disease deciding they don't especially want to sit through the surgery. Nobody at Elliott is telling you which one it is, and nobody at Southwest is either. Not really. Because the $4 promise is a spreadsheet answer to a question that was never really about spreadsheets in the first place.
You still don't know how this ends. Neither do I. Neither does anyone inside Southwest's headquarters. And if we're being honest with each other, neither does anyone at Elliott. Herb Kelleher used to say, the order mattered. People first, then customers, then everyone else. In that order, on purpose, out loud. To anyone who'd listen. He built an entire airline on that order, and for 47 years it worked. In an industry that mostly doesn't believe order matters at all. Nobody announced a new order. That's not how this happens. It never is. Somewhere between a storm that happened to share a name and a filing that changed everything after it, the order just quietly flipped, not with a memo, but with a series of small absences. One missing bag fee waiver, one missing boarding line, one missing name that used to be on an org chart. You don't usually catch the order changing while it's changing. You catch it later, in a seat you paid extra for, wondering for just a second when exactly you stopped being first. The ticker is still LUV, 4 letters, same as they've always been. Right there, every morning the market opens. Nobody had to change it. Maybe that's the part we're sitting with longer than any of the numbers. Bob Jordan is still the one signing the announcements. Still the same name at the bottom of every press release. The same voice on every earnings call. Maybe that continuity means something. Or maybe it means the fund got exactly what it wanted, without ever needing the one thing everyone outside assumed they were there for. Power that doesn't need your job, only your compliance, is a strange kind of power to try to explain to somebody who's never seen it work up close. And in some break room in Dallas, people who live through a storm named Elliott and then live through a fund named Elliott 18 months later, are still calling their leaders by first name, still wearing the same easy, informal culture Kelleher built on purpose, in a company that now answers, at the end of every quarter, to people who will never learn any of their names at all. Somewhere in the next 12 months, this either becomes the greatest turnaround story commercial aviation has ever told, or it becomes the answer to a question nobody really wanted asked out loud. Either way, you'll probably find out from a headline, not from this channel, but you'll understand that headline differently than everyone reading it next to you. You'll know what a proxy fight actually is. You'll know what $4 a share is really a promise about. You'll know that somebody, somewhere, is reading a company the way a doctor reads an X-ray, right now, looking for the next hairline fracture in something you love. That's the whole reason this channel exists. Not to tell you who the villain is. There usually isn't one. Clean and simple, the way we want there to be. Sometimes the people reading the numbers are right, and the company needed the shake. Sometimes they're just early to a decision that was always going to look ugly, no matter who made it. You get to decide which one this was. I'm not going to do that part for you. Just people, reading numbers, making decisions that ripple out into 100 million ordinary Tuesdays, unnoticed, long before anyone thinks to ask, who's actually flying the plane? If this one stayed with you, don't keep it to yourself. Send it to 5 people who'd get it. The ones who still remember what boarding used to feel like. Or the ones who just like understanding how the world actually works, underneath the version we're all handed. And before you go, tell me something true in the comments. Not what you think of Southwest. Tell me what you noticed changing in something you trusted, and when you first felt it. I read those. And tell me what company you want me to open up next. Whose name is on the building, and whose hands are actually on the wheel. Because somewhere, right now, another company you love is being read the same way. You just don't know it yet.